Hello, everybody. Hey, guys. Hope we're all having a fine day. Um, and today's episode is something that, again, I personally sort of resonate with in terms of it being a very, very important topic in today's, sort of scenario, which is to, how should one go about building an interesting personal brand, right? And yeah, I think this is a topic that you sort of came up with, and why not go ahead and give some context to what your thought process was behind it.
Sure, man. So honestly speaking, it's I've seen you writing content on LinkedIn since like 2020-ish, I think, and you were among the first people in at least in our group to sort of explore that whole content side, right?
Mm.
Uh, and it's been like for you, it's been like a fantastic journey, man. Honestly, like you've grown a lot on LinkedIn specifically. I think more than the follower count, I think it's more of what I've seen you do consistently is sort of be very consistent
Mm.
at writing content
Yeah.
since like the last 2 3 years, and honestly, it's honestly been like pretty inspirational for me personally as well, right? Just to see you sort of grow in that domain,
Mm.
and you are sort of building your company brand. I think it's
Mm.
amazing that side by side you're building something of
Mm.
your own distribution.
Mm.
And this is exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast and stuff like that. But I think like in today's time, it's like super important for someone to build a personal brand, which I think everyone wants to do, not just me or you. I think everyone needs to build a sort of a personal brand to sort of stand out. Uh, but for me, honestly, it's been like super hard. So I think this this whole topic is like a deep dive of what you have done in the last 2 3 years, and how I can also replicate it. Like I've wanted to do this, but I've been honestly I've been very scared.
Mm. Mm.
So the way I think we should sort of structure this is probably first is that you can talk about a bit of your journey,
Mm.
how you have sort of how did you start, right? Let's start from there.
Mm.
And what are some of the things that
Mm.
one can do to sort of start writing on, say, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all of those things, and then
Mm.
sort of uh, go there and really talk about the fact, yeah, what are some of the platforms, what should one write about, and stuff like that. So why over to
Absolutely.
you, man.
Right. So I'll maybe start. I'll take it from the top, right? I think because I was nurtured in terms of where I worked. Obviously, is largely a content company. It's like I mean, it's like if you work at a particular niche industry, you start developing those habits that are sort of promoted in that niche, right?
Hmm.
So I mean. In my case, given that I was in a content company, everybody was constantly posting on the likes of primarily LinkedIn in our case, but there's obviously a lot of companies who also go ahead and promote themselves more on, let's say, X, Twitter, or any other platform, Insta and all, right? But in terms of creating a personal brand, there's not a lot of avenues right now. I think primarily there's like Twitter, LinkedIn, Quora, right? Can't think of a lot. Instagram is, again, that comes a lot of. I mean, that's very time consuming in terms of coming up with content and all. Unless you're like really pursuing some kind of a strategy कि यार मेरे को अपना brand बना के इसको monetize करना है, then it's a different story. But largely these three avenues. Quora also I leave aside because it's pretty much out of. I mean, it's not the fad
Nobody
in
uses it.
very rarely, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Google
So
also took it
so
down in terms of like featured snippets and all. अभी Quora का तुम अगर search करते हो, you won't find a lot of these answers coming as a featured snippet on Google.
hmm.
So sorry, you were saying something. Yeah.
No, so I was saying to sort of if we can sort of structure it in a way that and let's say someone's been working for the last 1.5, 2 years at a
Mm.
corporate job,
Mm.
and he or she wants to sort of start writing something related to his job. So let's
Mm.
keep it very specific to your
True.
professional people.
Hmm.
who are working, who have been
Absolutely.
working for some time,
So,
right?
so what I was saying is basically that because I've been working in a content company, it was very easy for me to get into the habit of writing. You know,
Okay.
to be honest, यार मैं writer नहीं हूँ, right? For example, for the longest time, I enjoyed putting out opinions, but not so much as a writer, right? Which is to say that I like to tell my thoughts and ideas and concepts if it's helpful to people, but not कि मतलब मेरे को बहुत vocabulary झाड़नी है, or
Mhm.
those kind of things. Uh, so, but coming to your question, right? कि मतलब how does someone even begin this thing? Right? Um, the first thing is obviously coming to the point you have to have a basic agenda, राइट कि यार मैं कर रहा हूँ क्यों कर रहा हूँ why do I want to start this thing, right? Because
Mhm.
uh, creating right now, for example, the amount of time I've spent writing over the years, and I've written like probably 200 plus posts easily in my opinion, right?
Mhm.
uh, must have taken me a total of maybe 3-4 days worth of length combined in terms of
That's
just
it.
writing alone. Writing alone. I mean, I'm
I
saying if you just total all the number of hours spent just writing, right? That's the kind of amount of time you spend. And it's time taking, right? The problem for most human beings is that yeah, मैं time दे रहा हूँ, what is the worth I'm getting back, right? People jump into these fads of becoming, let's say, an influencer in today's time because they think that matlab, they just want to stand out from the crowd and do those kind of things, but that's not a very strong reason by itself. Just in my case, right, I'll give you my example. Like the reason I started putting out any kind of content is for two reasons. One is I wanted to obviously grow my profile to some extent. This was again in the much early days when I was still not sure what I was sort of doing, right? कि यार एक प्रोफाइल बनेगी अगर let's say on LinkedIn, I know that at least recruiting becomes a little easier for me, and this is again, this is quite long back, right? The second thing is also being able to promote my company much more because I was in the marketing field, right? So our primary target audience, for example, was on LinkedIn in those days as well as now also, right? So it came very naturally for me to go ahead and do that, right? So I think one place where anyone can start is actually having a very solid ground on which you're laying this foundation. कि यार मैं why do I really want to start? Now, in your case, right? I think um, because you're in product management, you don't necessarily deal with a lot of content except for maybe website level stuff. I don't know, website level or probably app level stuff,
Yeah.
right? So that's where you deal with it, and it's more of like copy also, not content specific.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your case, it could be that okay, I want to one maybe enrich people around me with insights from product because a lot of product managers, right? I don't see a lot of product managers on LinkedIn because again, you'll see a lot of marketing people, you'll see a lot of HR people, and you'll see a lot of PMs on Twitter instead, right? That's
Mhm.
how tech PMs are usually on Twitter. That's how it usually goes, right? So I think first you need to start with, yeah, okay, if I want to really do this, what's my end goal? My end goal could be as simple as, I want to grow my profile further in terms of, recruitment, because recruitment does become easier. If you have a good, presence, it's a no-brainer. कि यार तुम्हारा selection and all becomes much easier because you actually have some credibility in the market already, right? So I think just starting with a solid why, like Simon Sinek का जो एक book है, Start with Why. I don't know if you've read that, right? I think
No, no, no.
just I mean, just to encapsulate the whole book, it's just कि start with a good reason, so at least you know why you're doing this. Because एक time के बाद, see, 30 days तो तुम डाल दोगे content, right? After that you'll be like, bye bus, I am pretty bored of this, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's how, that's where you should start from. In terms of how you should start, that's a different question, right? And
So I think I think just to तूने एक बहुत सही बात बोली that 30 days or 15 days or a week someone will be able to write content, right? But beyond that it becomes sort of difficult, right? So and you have sort of managed to write content for 3 years, right? And of course you can say कि हाँ, one reason is the fact that you have been able to, there was a strong reason, or it was sort of related to your work, right? But still, how have you sort of stayed so consistent, and what should be the consistency that one should maintain? Like 1 week a post, 2 weeks a post, what is that frequency that one could sort of write for?
So frequency again would be very dependent. Okay, let's maybe bucket this into multiple topics, right? So one is obviously you know your why. You've established your why, which is key. I want to start content. I want to create something meaningful because I want to have a good profile. Take, let's start there, for example, right? The second is where do I start? Okay, and I'll come to how to continue with it just in the next this thing, right? So where you start also will again depend on where your field is, right? For example, if your niche is fitness, right? A fitness guy is not going to come. He can come on Twitter and LinkedIn, but it's going to be significantly harder to build an audience there simply because most people are not searching for those kind of insights, right? So a fitness guy would probably be uh, a very apt platform for him would be something Instagram, right? Because some reels banate jao and slowly you can kind of build up that audience, right? So I think that is, one of the things that you have to decide that if you're a tech guy, if you're a PM guy, it'll most likely be useful for Twitter, right, or LinkedIn also for in a lot of cases. If you're HR, if you are a marketing person, right, any other field that is involved in some kind of team building, for example, LinkedIn is great, right? I think LinkedIn
Hmm.
right now, in terms of the reach it's offering people, it's insane, right?
Hmm.
So, and Twitter is becoming increasingly harder because of the algorithms kind of changing very frequently, right? So I think
Hmm.
those are the decisions that one has to take, right? Lastly, which is your question कि यार तूने consistently लिखा, but कैसे, how did you pull it off? Because I think that's the problem with most of these
Hmm.
undertakings, right? Which is like this whole concept of delayed gratification. Yeah, you want to try for maybe a year or two and then actually start building an audience, a useful audience, right?
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
yeah, मेरे केस में it was very simple कि I was able to stay consistent because I was not actively creating novel ideas, you know. जैसे तेरा एग्जांपल लेते हैं, राइट? मान ले
Hmm.
तेरे को कुछ लिखना है, ठीक है? यू वांट टू राइट ऑन प्रोडक्ट, यू वांट टू राइट ऑन सम काइंड ऑफ ग्रोथ, राइट? यू वांट टू
Hmm.
राइट ऑन एनालिटिक्स। अब
Hmm.
एक तो काम कर सकता है, विच इज अ वेरी टीडियस प्रोसेस, कि यू सिट एंड रिसर्च ऑन आइडियाज, ठीक है? And you
Hmm.
take maybe 3 hours every day, you research on ideas and you write something and you push
Hmm.
it up. Problem is, you are not an established entity in the market for anything, maybe at this point in time. That's you're
Hmm.
starting
Hmm.
from ground up, right? It's
Hmm.
like, यार, रक्षित है कौन, मैं क्यों उससे सीखूं, you know? Like, not in an offensive way, I'm just giving you an
Hmm.
example, right? So the first thing is establishing who is Rakshit, not what he can offer, right? This is the most integral thing, right? Like my friend is from tech, for example, right? He's been wanting to write content for the longest time, but he just gets stuck because he doesn't know how to start, what to do. So I was just like, you know what? If you want to really try out something, give your own opinions to start with. Don't go about researching content from ground up. कि यार मान ले पीएम में कुछ नया न्यूज है, टेक में कुछ नया न्यूज है, right? What is Rakshit's opinion of that, right? Now that doesn't establish you as an expert on product. It establishes you as who is Rakshit, right? कि okay, is this guy is offering some new angle, new lens to this concept, right? So that's what I have done for the longest time, which is why I've been consistent. Keep trying to sort of uh, push out content which is not necessarily created newly, but it's just documented. You know, Gary Vee का एक बहुत common quote है. Not a big fan of Gary Vee anymore. I used to follow him a lot पहले. But there's one thing I particularly resonated, which is here, don't create, document, right? Document content, right? So that's what I usually do. कि यार हमने कुछ interesting infographic बनाया, I push it out. There is a new achievement, I push it out because that takes me 5 minutes to write, right? And it resonates with people because they're like, oh, Dhruv writes about this brand and he writes about his opinions on this brand, right? So it's very easy for them to connect with me, right? Now that is the basic, kind of basic level of insight I can give you into this.
Just to sort of summarize what we've spoken till now. So, what you've basically said is that number one is that you need to have a reason of why you are even beginning to write, right? And that can be as simple as uh, getting your profile up for recruitment, maybe meeting new PMs or meeting new people in your industry. And then the second thing is rather than sort of researching and doing all of those things, give out your opinions or just document your learnings, your failures, all of those things in like not a structured manner, but just putting it out there on, say, LinkedIn or Twitter and stuff like that. And we'll come to the platforms in a bit. But broadly, your point is, here, in order to say stay consistent, you need to sort of, the easiest way to do that is to sort of document. And yeah, that is exactly what Gary Vee did for, I think, if, I don't know how many, I don't follow him now, but I think he still does, which is like super interesting. Right. So coming to like the third and the fourth section, right? Let's sort of club it together. So if someone's relatively new to their career, let's say he's a fresher, obviously there's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of things happening, right? So how does number one, like when should one start writing? Because you start writing, I think, right at the beginning of your career, right? And when should one start writing? And the second question is ki how should one deal with the imposter syndrome? Ki yaar, am I even capable of writing this or not?
So true, man. That's so true, yeah. मतलब मैं तो this has been the case with me for the longest time. Even now, I feel like an imposter
Hmm.
syndrome. Like, I mean, it's very common among most people. But you know what? Someone once told me this very interesting thing. One of my senior management folks, right? कि यार आप जिस the kind of industry you're working in, it's like you are so focused on the 10% of people that might think you're dumb, right? But you totally ignore the 90% of people who have no idea about this field, and anything you're telling them is like new for them,
Hmm.
राइट कि यार अब जैसे आई गिव यू माय एग्जांपल राइट यू कुड थिंक कि भाई भाई कल को मैंने प्रोडक्ट के बारे में कुछ मैंने लिख दिया ठीक है लिंक्डइन या ट्विटर पे अब ध्रुव क्या सोचेगा बट इन रियलिटी I would still appreciate your opinion because I'm like I have no idea about this. Anything I'm kind of reading from your account is useful to me, right?
Hmm.
So I'm just like, look, let's get over this fact of people sort of what they're thinking about us because it's just 10% of people, probably even lesser,
Hmm.
right? But there's like 90% people who don't know you, and you are like a completely new face, new
Hmm.
role model for them in a lot of cases,
Hmm.
right? तो यार
Hmm.
उस तरीके से देखा जाए तो anything is better than nothing, right? कि
Hmm.
यार I remember this is HR intern of ours who's actually nailing the game, right? She has like this 27,000 following.
Hmm.
So she was an intern and she turned into a full time later on. But the point being that she is so consistent with her posting. And I think one time she asked me, "Yeah, Dhruv, there's this one idea I want to sort of put out, but I feel like yeah, anybody would think यार ये कौन है बोलने के लिए, right? She's just like an HR intern, right? And when she was an intern, she wanted to put this out,
Hmm.
and I was like यार देखो तुम्हारा 2 महीने का एक्सपीरियंस है या 2 साल का एक्सपीरियंस है, right? Experience is experience, right? Insights
Hmm.
are insights. You cannot say that 2 months of experience is meaningless, right? ऐसा तो नहीं बोल सकते, right? So anything in that way that you feel is useful, you should put it out, right? And I think she put it out and she got like some 1,000 likes and like went insanely viral. So like damn
Hmm.
interesting. But I think yeah, that's the main thing, right? If you want to get over the imposter syndrome, just having this realization कि भाई बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो जानते ही नहीं है, right? And anything I'm putting out, even if it's useful to 5 people, भाई I ask you, right? अगर 5 लोग भी तेरा content consistently follow करेंगे, I'd still feel like you post because it's like यार 5 लोग भी सीख रहे अच्छी बात है यार, क्या प्रॉब्लम है,
Hmm.
right? I
Hmm.
mean, I feel like that. I think one person told me कि यार ध्रुव तेरा कंटेंट देख के एक बार मैं इंस्पायर हो गया था भाई. I
Hmm.
lost my mind. I was like यार shit ऐसा भी होता है क्या? मतलब because I always thought कि यार people just like for the sake of it, क्या ही फर्क पड़ता
Hmm.
होगा, right? But somewhere people are actually reading and resonating with it, which blew my mind, and
Hmm.
that kept my momentum also going in a way, you know.
Interesting.
So yeah, I think that's one of the aspects of it.
Interesting. So just to sort of once again summarizing what you just said about the whole imposter syndrome and when should one start writing, right? It doesn't matter whether you have like 2 months of experience versus like 2 years of experience, as long as you have something to put out, right? That can be, and bringing it back to like the first 2 points that we spoke, that we had to, that we had talked about, was the fact here it can just be a document of your internship experience, or it could just be a documentation of, let's say, uh, a product that you released, or
Correct.
a product that worked or did not work, and what were the learnings from it and stuff like that, right? And it could be as simple as that. And as long as, and I guess 90% of people don't know, you don't care. So, and even if you sort of do come up on their timeline, they're not going to publicly bash you, right?
Correct.
So I think uh, it's a no-brainer that way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I think last 2 points that we should cover is the fact that what should one talk about, right? One thing that
True.
you said is documentation, right?
True.
कि यार जो भी मैं सीख रहा हूँ वो मैं लिखूं, right? So maybe you can sort of double down on the fact कि
Okay.
यार documentation हम लोग कैसे कर सकते हैं.
Right.
And then the second part is that this is what I've personally noticed
Hmm.
on LinkedIn specifically, right? That a lot of people have started writing content, but it's just a copy paste from
Oh
ChatGPT,
yeah, man! I
right? And
swear
it's so
the
annoying.
fucking chat GPT prompts, by
It's so
that's
annoying.
horrible.
Like it's
It's
so
horrible. It's
easy to
horrible.
identify. It's so easy
It's
to identify.
true.
So what do you think about that, right? Number one,
Yeah.
and should someone simply just copy paste from ChatGPT? We all know the answer, that is a no go. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you use ChatGPT too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
how can we use that for
I'll tell
better?
you, there's a damn funny incident because one of these people who was applying was so we have like these application form questions, right? तो यार एक बंदा क्या करता है कि he puts up like this ChatGPT type answer. But now
Hmm.
ChatGPT also what it does very often is it will leave some fields blank, insert name, ठीक है? कि
अच्छा,
ब्रैकेट्स में. अब भाई साहब ने
obviously.
पढ़ा नहीं और उठा के डाल दिया.
अच्छा.
Like super funny. But
Hmm.
but yeah, I think that's the problem, right? That look, AI can write good content, okay, but ultimately the people reading it are humans, right? So
Hmm.
is some form of personalization obviously is super important, right? कि यार आप, as I said, grammatically correct, written stuff is not, let's say, stuff that actually works, right? Because I've seen like these people, who write these posts which are absolutely incorrect grammatically, right? Like it's like all over the place, weird sentence structures, समझ भी नहीं आ रहा है. But it's so like heartwarming, like I say, like दिल को छू जाता है, वैसा type का चीज. So and automatically it kind of goes viral, right? So
Hmm.
I feel like in that case, it's like what you write is not necessarily important in terms of grammar and vocabulary. It
Hmm.
should be useful meaningful, right? In
Hmm.
some ways to people reading it, right?
Hmm.
Um, that is, and the thing is, a lot of people believe यार कि memes डाल के ना मैं viral हो जाऊंगा 10 बार, and हो जाते हैं लोग. Like there are these templatized things that you often see on Twitter and LinkedIn. Ki, I spent 100 hours on LinkedIn. Here's what happened. Like, and here's how I built a following, right? So people are not stupid, right? You have to realize कि यार लोग गधे नहीं हैं. They realize that you're using like a template, right? So somewhere you have to build that genuineness of what you're offering, right?
Hmm.
कि यार, let's say in your case, like you're asking, what do you post about, for example, right? Like, where do I begin? So again, if you start with the why of, okay, I want to build a profile on PM, right?
Hmm.
I think the first thing is, starting with the fact that, oh, we launched this super interesting thing yesterday, right? This super interesting new app on our website, on our app or website, right? Now, what's going to happen is what you did there is one is you're creating something called a celebrational post, right? Now, any kind of celebratory content is largely liked by everyone. Basically, सब जाके बोलेंगे भाई तालियां दे दो इसको. ठीक है, तेरे worst enemy will also be like, यार ठीक है, इसने कुछ उखाड़ा है, let's go and like this post for it, right? So automatically, this like some kind of distribution is already solved. The second thing is if you're working with a brand, all the employees of that brand also want to kind of come and like that post, right? So you often see that if you want to crack a good distribution network in the initial days, you should definitely talk about your company, because your founding team, your management, your friends, colleagues will all
Mhm.
come and like it, right?
Mhm.
Celebratory stuff always works, right? Always works, right?
Interesting.
Um, the second thing is, so I usually categorize content to three, four brackets, right? So celebration, information, topical stuff, which is just like trend kya chal raha hai, and relatable content, right? And I think this relatable content is the most important, because people unconsciously are drawn to it, right? कि यार मैंने कुछ ऐसा किया, and this I feel like you guys will also feel the same, right? Do you agree or not? And that's what a lot of people sort of go out and do. Like for example, if you face a very, so I'll tell you, I posted this thing sometime back, right? कि whenever I go to the movies, I'll tell my girlfriend the content strategy of the whole movie, and she'll just be like, "भाई, क्या है? हर बार शुरू रहता है," right? So that post went kind of semi-viral, but you just see, like I played the whole relatability ki a lot of the marketing people will be like, "हाँ भाई मैं भी ये करता हूँ,"
Mhm.
you know. And not an unethical way per se, but just कि यार मतलब that's the idea of the post, right? Basically.
Yeah.
So that's one place you can start. One of the things, as I mentioned, is obviously not focusing entirely on grammar, but understanding the whole sphere of business writing, right? Like if I put up stuff like this, let's say a 10 line paragraph as it is, right? There's no structure. See, people automatically they're like, "Hey, I can't read this. It's too much cognitive overload in one shot," right? No, these are signs you have. This is like the whole psychology of how people read and relate to stuff, right? So I mean, you have to understand it on some level. If I go out and just say that, oh, I achieved something great today, you guys should come in. I mean, nobody cares about those kind of things, right? You have to make it enticing. You have to make it key had this amazing achievement today, or like I'm super pumped to announce the fact that I just crossed 1,000 subscribers on, let's say, YouTube. Like, you have to be able to structure insights, right? Even if you're not grammatically
Structure the other you need to, I think what you're trying to get to is you need to amplify it. Like you need to, and it's not,
नहीं है. It's
but
like it's
it's
like यार
still.
भाई तू खाना बना रहा है, तू खाना बना रहा है, ठीक है. अब तू खाना कैसे सर्व करेगा? या तो तू मतलब हर जगह फेंक के सर्व करेगा, खाना तो खाना है, ठीक है. सेम वे. Or are you serving it on a plate, right? So presentation structure, that is what I'm talking about, right? You have to be structured. You cannot just post random stuff, even if it's very insightful. It's not going to work, right? I think so. That's super important.
Just to sort of add to it, right? And I would love to know your opinion on it. Is the fact that in a world which and probably Chat GPT and all can help you sort of amplify or help you structure those sentences better, right?
Correct.
But in a world which is sort of moving to a very structural kind of a thing, right? Because of Chat GPT, everything is very, very structured. Everyone has the perfect grammar, perfect English, right? I think there is more and more reason or room to be
Yes.
imperfect in that world,
You're
right?
so right. You have nailed it. You're so right. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, grammatical errors are like, यार इस बंदे ने at least कुछ तो effort
exactly,
डाला है, right? You
exactly,
can see it.
exactly.
At one point, you probably would, you know, condemn the other person for these kind of things, but now you
But now it's sort
eh,
of like, yeah, yeah,
precisely,
this is
precisely.
something that
And I'll tell you one more thing, right? I mean, coming to the whole this thing of ChatGPT, right? So I'll tell you how I use it, because this is what I think works for me,
hmm,
which is I write the whole post by myself, right? Like I write whatever I feel by myself. I use ChatGPT only as an assistant for restructuring how I've written it, right? Ki
hmm,
if I place it, I don't again use the exact same post, because it's very obvious. It's too impeccable level of grammar. It's
correct.
just like यार ये मैं नहीं लिख सकता हूँ. मतलब everybody knows that, right? So
Yeah.
they're not stupid enough to be like हाँ मतलब इसने लिखा है, right? So can I
Hmm.
just shift elements of some lines and sentences which I believe are better structures, rather than try to improve the writing in a manner that just seems unconventional or unbelievable in some ways. You know, so that's something that's super important, and I'm glad you pointed that out. Right, I think that clears
Yeah.
a big part of this bit. Yeah. So,
And lastly, I think just to sort of end this, and I think a lot of people who would be watching this would want to know, and I think we did cover that briefly earlier. But let's say you're a working professional, right? And you're, let's say, a coder or a product manager or a marketer. What are some of the platforms that you can use to sort of amplify your profile? One is, of course, LinkedIn.
hmm,
But should people use Twitter? Should people use Quora?
hmm.
We spoke about it briefly, but just want to sort of
यार
structure it properly for
इसमें
everyone.
हाँ इसमें मैं क्या बताता हूँ कि so I spoke to this guy called Jack Appleby who is head of social at I think Morning Brew. So I don't know if you know.
Hmm.
I think you know Morning Brew,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
of course I
I
know.
had a lucky shot of talking to him. He was conducting one of his mentoring sessions, and I asked him, yeah, कि, you know, he has like 50k following on Twitter, and
Hmm.
he just posts like just random stuff, right? It's just documented content. Ki, today I won a basketball tournament. Today I did this, right? So I think he told me. I asked him, you know, कि, मतलब, should one go about trying to omni-channel, you know, build this omni-channel thing? कि यार Instagram पे भी हो, Twitter पे भी हो, LinkedIn पे भी, right?
Hmm.
Yet he's like, look, it really depends on your goals, right? Like if you are a creator as a full-time person, obviously on some level you might benefit from omni-channel work, right? कि Instagram पे चल तेरा कुछ चल गया, Shorts चल गया, Twitter पे
Hmm.
कुछ चल गया. So it's a possibility, right? But for most of us who don't have the time availability, like I, for example, write, let's say, 30 minutes every day, probably. On most days I don't find the time also, right? So in that case, just going with one platform, okay? For now, okay, like for example, look, X and Insta and LinkedIn are very well established. It's just a question of competition, right? डिस्ट्रप्शन का भी बहुत लोगों को फेयर होता है कि यार मैं बना रहा हूँ एक ही चैनल पे बना रहा हूँ बट व्हाट इफ कल को कुछ हो गया डिलीट हो गया कुछ हो गया डिस्टर्ब हो गया पूरा right?
Hmm.
So in that case, I feel you just should double down on one thing, right? If you're building a Twitter, build a Twitter. Don't go about your LinkedIn से मेरे को Twitter पे भी अब audience खींचना है. Because उसमें क्या होता है ना, you start distributing focus and then you're not really that whole it becomes very difficult to manage, right? Because अब जैसे Twitter है, for example, X है, right? अब X का जो style and structure of content रहता है, that's entirely different from LinkedIn, right? So I think one तो यही है कि you should know कि where you want to start and just focus on that. You were saying something. I think you wanted to say something.
Can you can one use the same thing? Let's say you write something on LinkedIn. Can you use the same
Yeah,
thing on Twitter?
you can, but it's just matlab, as I said, I would really suggest that you focus on one thing first. अब जैसे तो you're starting from scratch, right? For example,
Hmm.
अब you don't want to be like by LinkedIn पे same चीज post करूँगा, Twitter पे same चीज post करूँगा, इसका Instagram भी बना दो. It's too much like hard and it's difficult to produce. Now, I would just say that build up a good platform following on one platform first, and then maybe after a point you can start drawing out that following into the other platforms also. That's what most people do, and that is
Hmm.
very it's possible, right? But maybe doubling down on a good reach platform first. For example, right now, as I said, X is the reach on X is a little hard to crack off late because now they
Hmm.
diversify into videos and all also, right?
Hmm.
So in my opinion, again, platform like LinkedIn is very easy because there's a lot of they're pushing creators like insane, like it is
Hmm.
unbelievable, right?
Hmm.
So they have
Exactly.
like a whole creator program also going on. I think X is also starting that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So picking one and probably just going out there and starting that one thing, right? Um, now coming to amplifying reach, यार एक चीज मैं बताऊंगा कि देखो स्टार्टिंग में तो तुम्हारा कोई पोस्ट लाइक नहीं करने वाला, ठीक है?
Hmm.
Like you might be like भाई तुम्हारे कुछ कुछ college friends, some couple of people in your network know you, so they might like it, right? But the best thing is honestly, if you're starting out, just game the system, okay? Like just know how to game the system, okay? Like honestly, there are something called a pod groups basically क्या होता है कि people join this and they get their posts liked and retweeted, ठीक है? And like there's like a people of hundreds of people are there, so that's a very good way if you want to just start, if you just want to get some initial traffic,
Or
right?
like what you said, na, ki when you talk about your company or your colleagues and stuff like
Absolutely, absolutely. So that is
that,
obvious
right? That,
that I covered,
that
but even for
mm,
that, I think if your company, let's say, is a very small company, it's like 10 people, right? Or your brand is not known, very hard for you to actually get your name out there. So that is
interesting.
one thing. But the other thing is pods, for example, could be a good place to get some initial traffic. I know there's one guy who has like 50,000 followers on LinkedIn right now, and he started off with a pod for the first 20,000 followers and scaled very fast. After that, he left the pod because pod में क्या होता है? A lot of random people will jump into your post and like comment like wow, nice post and those kind of things,
Mm,
to just get to the algorithmic reach, right?
mm,
But then he jumped out of it and still got the same traction. So ये तुम कर सकते हो. It's not super ethical. You can do that. Or what you can do is very interesting thing. मेरा एक और दोस्त था who was posting something. So he would go to all his LinkedIn connections and send them that hey, I wrote this very interesting post that's going viral. I would love your support, right?
mm,
Easy stuff, right? And I actually went and did it. I was like, ठीक है यार, अब reach out कर रहा है, तो let's just go and do it, right?
interesting.
And you could do that. You could easily do that, right? Sending it to your friends, sending it to your colleagues, putting it up on your WhatsApp status. Very easy to do,
Sure.
right? So yeah,
Cool, man. So let me just summarize everything. So we have had like a long conversation, but let me just summarize everything for everyone and correct me if I go wrong, right? So the first is that someone needs to sort of start with a reason or like a mission. Yeah, this is why I'm doing it,
mm,
and this is what will sort of drive me post 15 days, post 30 days, and stuff like that.
correct,
Second is that it's much easier to sort of document your journey with some kind of personal insights rather than just doing like topical slash news stuff, right?
correct,
The third is that one needs to sort of get out of the whole imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter if you have like 2 months of experience versus 2 years of experience. As long as you're documenting your journey and talking about this is where I fucked up, this is where I need to improve and stuff like that, or this is what I did to sort of improve this outcome, right? Fourth is that it doesn't matter where you post, but just doubling down on one platform. One of those platforms is LinkedIn, as you rightly said कि हाँ काफी ज़्यादा creators को push कर रहे हैं.
correct.
And finally, I think in a world of sort of AI where everything is so structured, it's important that you use AI or you use things like ChatGPT to sort of you know be an assistant, but let it not be the writer. You are the writer. You are the one who's giving some insights and stuff like that. And and not and being imperfect is fine, at least
Correct.
in this day and age.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
And
perfectly summed up. Correct.
yeah, and finally, I think uh, in terms of like amplifying your reach and all, one of the ways is if you post about your matlab, something that you did in your company or
Correct.
the pod that you said, maybe you
Correct.
can like in the description we can include one of those pods. I don't know how ethical or unethical that is, but
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting insight.
True. So
Cool,
hopefully
man.
अब से रक्षित का कंटेंट दिखेगा, मैं भी लाइक करूंगा जब
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully.
so
Hopefully.
the bet is going to be that from this podcast, if Rakshit takes off as an influencer, then I think this podcast will also take off in a lot of ways. No, absolutely. I think that's a wrap on today's podcast, right? And I think if you guys have been enjoying Perspectify, as I say, if you guys can share it with one friend, just a family member, anybody who's trying to build out a good brand, let's say in today's time, would be super useful to us. And obviously, you'll always get my love and yeah, Rakshit's love also followed by whether his LinkedIn takes off or not, right? So yeah, that's it, up, folks. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.